thank you, Dixie, and thank you so much for the invitation to join you all today. I am very excited to share with you the findings from our first ever groundbreaking research into member motivations. And so with that, let me just hop over here. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. And just give me the thumbs up if everyone can see that. Okay. Looking good. All right. Great. So this is a first of its kind research study that I'm going to be talking about with you all today. We conducted the research last year with 30 organizations, and we're doing this research in collaboration with our good friends over at QZM. If you're not familiar with QZM, they do a lot of work in the technology space around digital member cards and member portals and lots of other good stuff for museums. So if you're not familiar, please definitely go check them out. They've been a wonderful advocate and champion for shared learning. And so we teamed up to learn something new that previously we didn't have any data on for the museum industry. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. We were very fortunate to have 30 organizations participate in the inaugural study, representing a wide range of size, type of organization, and discipline. And I'll share with you a little bit more as we go into the study design. But I'm just so grateful for these organizations for participating, because without their participation, we wouldn't have the data that we have and be able to raise all ships with the findings today. So a little bit of background on the member motivation study. So I've been in the museum membership field for a little over 12 years now. We work exclusively as a partner for arts and cultural organizations in research strategy and membership and audience development. So that's where we focus. And since I first got started in the space, I've always been curious about how social identity and member motivations all kind of tied together in this decision to become a member in the first place. And so with this study, we set out to develop an evidence-based model of member behavior. And we wanted to do that by first understanding those hidden motivations behind that decision to join. So our hypothesis is that if we expose prospective members to a social identity framed value proposition, they'll be more likely to click on the Join Now button than those who view the control. And I'm going to talk through and give you some background around social identity and what we tested, as well as what the control is. So for this first study, what we did is we used an intervention of a landing page. So we designed our control. This is all about the transactional frame of membership. So this is really that transactional value proposition. It's the idea of join today, save money, get access to exclusive benefits, visit for free all year long. So this should sound very familiar to all of you. This is the way that we have traditionally marketed membership, and it's very ingrained in all of our membership messaging. So this is what we established as our control. Then we developed a set of 4 distinct social identity variants, which I'll show you now. The first is around sense of belonging. So this is all about being part of a community. So for example, if I consider myself to be an art lover, I want to do things that reinforce that identity of myself. And one of those things might be becoming a member of the art museum, because that helps me to get closer to this community and feel that sense of belonging. The second social identity variant we tested is around being a facilitator. If any of you are familiar with John Falk's research into museum visitor identities, this will sound very familiar, because he's done research in this space and found that this facilitator identity is really powerful in terms of why people visit a museum. So we wanted to see if we could explore that social identity and activate that as an identity in terms of membership. So here, the idea is that a facilitator is someone who is facilitating an experience for someone else. So the focus is not necessarily on the individual, like the parent, for example, it's on the child. So if I consider myself to be a good parent, I want to do things that help reinforce that identity of myself. One of those things might be to become a member at the Children's Museum, because that will enable me to share all of the wonderful educational experiences with my child and give them a great experience. So in that way, membership becomes an enabler. And this idea of being a facilitator is tied to that motivation. The next social identity frame we explored is around sense of responsibility. So this is all about mission, but what we wanted to do is see if we could decouple the mission aspect from the value proposition of the traditional way that we talk about membership. So typically, when we see membership marketing, we always hear the mission tacked on to that transactional value proposition. So, that sounds something like become a member today, get access to all these wonderful benefits, visit for free all year long, and support our mission. And so we wanted to just see if we could have the mission concept stand on its own. Now, what you'll notice is that in this iteration here of the landing page, the institution specific mission is not expressed here. This is very generalized. So this is more about the big idea that membership matters, membership makes a difference. And so we wanted to see if we could tap into that idea of having a sense of responsibility. Membership is the right thing to do. It's a good thing. And lastly, we tested a social identity frame around being an explorer. So this also is inspired from John Falk's research into museum visitor identities. And the idea here is that many people consider themselves to be lifelong learners, and they are seeking out experiences and things that will feed that curiosity. So we wanted to see if membership could be positioned as a mechanism for those lifelong learners, for those explorers. So let me walk you through the study design. This is, as I mentioned, the first year of the research. We had 30 organizations participating, and the wonderful thing is that we had a really good mix of all different types of discipline, size of organization, admission type, and geography. So that allowed us to go a little deeper with our findings, and I'll share with you, I'll be able to share by discipline some of our findings as well. So to start the research, what we did is we asked each of the participating organizations to send out an email that you see here on the screen. This email went out to their list of non-members, both visitors and lapsed members. And it's a very simple, generic kind of an email. We did not want to bias the results on the front end. So we stripped out any sort of marketing messaging as part of this email. The subject line reads, become a member. And the copy reads, interested in becoming a member at the XYZ museum. And then there is a call to action to learn more. And each organization included an exterior photo of their building, their logo, and a contact person. Since we were a little concerned that perhaps people would be so surprised by this very bland, not sexy marketing email that they might worry that maybe it was a phishing scam or something. So we wanted to make sure that we gave some legitimacy to it and gave them a contact person if they had any questions about the authenticity of the email. Once someone clicked that learn more button, they were taken into our experiment. Now, I want to stress that this was not a survey. We didn't ask people what they thought about these messages. We actually observed them in the real world. So they clicked that learn more button, and then they were randomly distributed to either the control or one of our 4 social identity framed messages. This is known as a randomized controlled field experiment. And it's the gold standard when it comes to research, because again, we're not asking about intent or asking people to tell us how they feel about things. There's certainly a place for surveys in research. I'm a big believer in survey research as a methodology for the right types of purposes. In this case, what we wanted to do is we wanted to really see how people responded in real time to these messages. So that's why we chose this intervention of the field experiment. So here is how the study results funnel looks. Of those 30 organizations, we had over 745,000 emails sent out. Of those, 724,000 were received, and over 297,000 were opened. So this represents a 41% open rate, and it's a very robust sample size for this study. So we feel very confident in our findings. We had about 9,700 clicks on that email. That's about a 1% click-through rate. Very healthy click-through rate there. And we had over 10,000 arrivals to our study landing pages. Now, some of those arrivals came from social media, because we did ask each organization to post one non-boosted social media post to either Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram that mirrored the email. So it was the exact same copy and image and call to action, but an organic post. So, we didn't expect to get many click-throughs on that, just because of the nature of social media being very much a pay-for-play channel. But we did have a few come in that way. And then finally, we arrived at 6,043 clicks on the Join Now button from the study landing pages. So that's about a 0.8% click-through rate. Now, before we jump into the findings, just to share a little bit of background on how we perform the statistical test. This was tested using a one-tailed z-test. And so what we're doing here is we're testing the likelihood that someone is going to click on that Join Now button from the variant landing pages. So we're testing to see whether or not they're more likely to click on those study landing pages, the test variants. When you see this hexagon here with an asterisk, that indicates that that finding is statistically significant. That means that we have a 95% confidence level that the result we're seeing is due to our experimental manipulation. It's a very strong indicator that what we're seeing is not due to chance. When you see the diamond with the caret, that indicates that what we're seeing there is a marginally significant result. That's where we have a 90% confidence that what we're seeing is due to our experimental manipulation. So both of these indicate that we have very high level of confidence in our findings. Okay, so without further ado, here are the findings. This is what we learned. So the first thing that we found is that prospects for membership were in fact more likely to click on that Join Now button from our social identity frame test variants than from the control. So this is a pretty big deal because, in membership marketing, we lean very heavily on that transactional frame of membership. And in fact, it's almost the only thing you see when it comes to a value proposition in membership. For our first social identity frame, sense of belonging, this is the messaging around being part of a community of like-minded individuals. Here we found a marginally significant result that variant outperformed the control. And remember, the control is that transactional value proposition of membership. For our variant C around the social identity frame of being a facilitator, Here we found with statistical significance that social identity outperformed the control. We did not see any significant difference between the performance of the control and the social identity frame of sense of responsibility. They performed equally as well. And for our last social identity frame of an explorer, that messaging did outperform the control at a statistically significant level. So here we have empirical evidence that we can be as effective or more effective by leveraging this social identity framing around that value proposition of membership. And we'll talk more about kind of what that means in terms of strategy as we go forward here. So the second thing that we've learned is that we found some differences depending on the type of admission. So for our paid admission organizations, we found that this concept of being a facilitator, so that's that idea of facilitating experience for someone else, was statistically significant in outperforming the control, as was the explorer social identity variant. So those two were both more effective than the control value proposition. For free admission organizations, we found that this idea of sense of belonging was statistically significant in outperforming the control. So this is important to keep in mind too, because of course, free admission organizations are challenged from the beginning in terms of marketing membership from that transactional frame, simply because we've removed one of the primary benefits of membership, that being free admission. We also found some really interesting differences by discipline. So when we look at our findings based on type of organization from a content perspective, we found that art museums had statistically significant results in 3 of the social identity frames: facilitator, sense of responsibility, and explorer. And all 3 of those outperformed the control. Now, what's interesting about this is that if you'll recall, sense of responsibility on the broader scale in the aggregate did not show any significant difference from a statistical standpoint. But when we drill down by discipline, we do see that for art museums, that's a very strong motivator. For our nature and garden center gardens, and this would include Arboreta, here we found that the facilitator social identity frame was statistically significant in outperforming the control. We did not have any significant differences in our science center, history, and children's museum cluster. Now, a couple of notes there. One is that we did not have a large enough cohort of history museums to be able to pull them out into their own bucket. I think if we had, these results might look a little different, but for now, what we found is that the control was a strong performer for these organizations, and we didn't have any social identity frames that outperformed the control at that statistical level that we were looking for. For our multidisciplinary organizations, we found that sense of belonging, facilitator, and explorer social identity frames all were statistically significant in outperforming the control. Now, one note here is that within this cluster of multidisciplinary organizations, we do have a mix of organizations representing science, history, and children's museums. So I do think that some of the learning here from multidisciplinary organizations can be applied to science centers, history museums, and children's museums, because we know that they are actually represented in this multidisciplinary group. So what I'd like to do now is just show you a few examples of some of the individual level findings by institution, just to show you how different some of these findings were from organization to organization. So for the Denver Botanic Gardens, we found that the facilitator message was a very strong motivator, outperforming the control at that 95% confidence level. Our Children's Museum of Indianapolis, which I've been using as an example to show you the different messaging and the example of the email. For this organization, we did not see any significant difference in the findings. So all of these messages performed roughly as well. For the Cincinnati Museum Center, here we found a sense of belonging, facilitator, and explorer all being statistically significant and outperforming the control. And for the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, which is a free museum, sense of belonging was at that 95% confidence level, and the facilitator social identity frame was marginally significant, outperforming the control. So we have a lot of variety here. And I think, one of the key things to keep in mind that I really want you to leave with is that there are a few things to know about social identity as we're thinking about this from a marketing standpoint. The first is that, first and foremost is that the transactional frame of membership, that traditional value proposition of membership, still works. It is still valid. I am certainly not suggesting with these results that we stop talking about access to benefits and free admission. That is still a really important piece of the puzzle when it comes to marketing membership. For example, somebody who is standing in line at the box office is probably going to be looking at the prices, and they're probably going to be thinking to themselves, well, gee, if I buy a membership today, that means I can come back next weekend and it'll be free. And so when they are, when our audiences are doing the membership math, standing in line, they are in a very transactional mindset. And it's important that we have marketing and we talk to them about membership in that way, because they're in that calculative mindset. They're thinking about it. What we know about social identity is that it changes depending on the context, the situation, and the goals that we are trying to achieve at the moment. So all of us at any time carry numerous social identities, and they can be activated depending on that context or depending on the role that we're playing. So, for example, if I have my nibblings coming in for the weekend, for those of you who aren't familiar with nibblings, that's a gender neutral term for nieces and nephews. I love it. It's one of my favorite new words to enter the lexicon. And so if I want to entertain my nibblings for the weekend, I am in that facilitator mindset. So I'm thinking about it in that way. I'm probably going to be more responsive to that type of messaging than I would be to this idea of being an explorer, perhaps. However, if I'm looking to learn something new and I'm thinking about what I want to do with my spouse on an evening night, maybe I'm thinking more in that explorer mindset. So each of us might respond to every single one of these messages at different times. So it's not, when we set out to do this research, it's not about finding the one winner, the one message that's the most important message that we should all start using and stop doing everything else. What I think this research really tells us is that we have an opportunity to be more intentional about how we talk about membership. We have an opportunity to learn more about who our audiences are, who our members are, what they care about, and to be more responsive throughout not just their kind of day-to-day lives and life cycle, but their life cycle with us. because as someone gets to know us more and they become more connected to us, if we can be more intentional, for example, about inviting people in to be part of a community and create those experiences for members, we can help to reinforce that social identity, and we can connect the dots between the marketing messaging and the actual experience of being a member. So these are all just pieces of a bigger puzzle for us to be thinking about. And it really comes down to strategy and what we are trying to achieve with our membership programs to think about how we want to frame the value proposition. So if anyone has any questions after the webinar today, please feel free to reach out to me directly. My email address here, rosie@5seed.com, and I would be happy to talk with you more. I did want to share that we have opened enrollment for the second year of this research study. So this is a multi-year initiative. We have open enrollment through June of next year of 2024. And we're going to be doing some really cool things with this next year of research. We're going to be first conducting some broader messaging optimization. So we're going to be looking at exploring all of those messages that I just shared with you, but in a deeper context. We want to understand how people comprehend those messages, how they perceive those messages, how resonant they are. And we also want to understand who these people are, a little bit more about them, because in our first year, once individuals entered our experiment, they became anonymous to us. So we did not know anything about them and why they were responding to that particular message at that particular time. With this next phase of research, we want to understand more about them from a demographic standpoint, but also from an attitudinal and psychographic standpoint. And we want to be able to understand how they interpret those messages, because some of those messages, especially with the imagery, it's kind of another part of this, is that imagery is so powerful. And because of the way that we scoped the first year of research with the field experiment, we needed to include an image. And so we tried to select, a variety of images, and the best image that we thought reflected that message. But the images create bias. If I'm not a parent or a male, I may not see myself in that image of the male with a child. That might not be as compelling for me. Similarly, we think that there could potentially be some bias in some of the other imagery just based on race, gender identity, and who is kind of shown in the image, because social identity is such a personal thing. And part of what makes it effective is that we can see ourselves in the image. So in the next round of research, we're going to see if we can mitigate the effect of imagery, try testing those messages without the imagery, and like I say, dig in a little deeper. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to have a cohort of organizations that already are using a marketing automation software. And that is going to allow us to test what I call a closed loop learning system. So we're going to be able to actually see who those individuals are, what message they were exposed to, how they responded, and then on the back end, learn a little bit more about them. So that's going to be a little bit of a smaller cohort, because we'll need to ensure that they have the software for us to be able to accomplish that test. And we've selected Salesforce Marketing Cloud as the marketing automation software to accomplish that effort. But that means that not everyone will be able to participate in that cohort. So that's why we have also the broader messaging optimization testing that we'll be doing. So hopefully, I invite all of you to take a look and see what we're doing. We have an FAQs page where you can learn more about all of the logistics, the timeline, the costs, the responsibilities, everything that's kind of part of participating in the research. I hope that you all will join us in this next round of learning, and we'll be able to together dive in a little deeper and learn a lot more that will help raise all ships as we go forward. So thank you again for giving me a chance to share these findings with you today. And I'm happy to, answer any questions or just have some broader discussion around membership.
Well, that was great. I learned a lot, and I thought that was really wonderful. It's great to know that you could do either or. Like you could test these messages without feeling like you're probably going to lose revenue, because they all at least perform about the same, and then some of them perform better. So I think that's really an awesome thing to think about for our museums.
Yeah, definitely. And what's great is a lot of the organizations that participated in the research this first time around, they've taken these findings and they're starting to do some of their own testing. So, for example, they might be testing one social identity frame of sense of community, sense of belonging against a control message in their direct mail campaign. And so, or they might be doing their own email A/B tests. So I really encourage all of you to take these messages and start, if either one of two things or both. One would be to do your own testing. So carry this same test forward at your own institution. And or just start integrating these messages into your membership marketing. So I think we could be more effective if we led with some of the social identity messaging, and make sure, we still want to include the value proposition around the transactional frame. I mean, that is, again, important. People want to know how much things cost and they want to know what they're going to get for their money. That is the basic premise of membership, benefits in exchange for dues. So we want to keep that present. But I think if we start wrapping some of this more social identity messaging around it, will ultimately be more effective. We might not know who is going to respond to which message right at that moment, but at least we're starting to plant the seeds and connect with different individuals based on what they might be feeling.
Did anyone have any thoughts or questions?
Did you guys discuss in phase 1 about the size of museums and how that affected what identity would attract members?
So we did have a wide range of size of organization, although we definitely had a lot more weighted on the smaller to mid-sized organizations. And I think that's kind of the nature of the bell curve of museums. Bell curve, probably not the right word there. We know that museums in general, we have a lot of smaller museums, a lot of mid-sized museums, and then fewer large organizations. So I think our sample size is fairly reflective of the industry overall. Size of organization, I think, is less important than the discipline and the admission type of the organization. That said, a smaller organization may have visitors who are more connected to the organization, depending on kind of who those people are. So these are the things that I think we'd like to explore more as we go forward with the research.
I will say something that Alaska has is we get a PFD every year, which is a amount of money that everyone who lives in Alaska for over a year gets. And something that people are able to do is they're able to donate that money, part of that money, to nonprofits in Alaska. And I know that they did something similar here, where they did an A/B test of, they had a lot of heart kind of messaging, like heart love Alaska, like give the money back to Alaska because you love it, and more feely messaging. And then they had, I think, tax messaging maybe. And they did that test and they found that the messaging that was about, loving Alaska and putting the money back into Alaska did a lot better than the other messaging. So it's definitely something, the identity of being Alaskan and trying to give back to the state is something that really works here as well, with donations too.
I love that. No, that's a really strong identity around your hometown, your hometown pride, all of
Mhm.
that. I could see how that'd be very compelling. Um, I see a note in here that a question around PDF. And so just a note there to say that we'll share the slides from today after the webinar, but also we're finalizing a report, more of a narrative report. And so that will be released soon. And I'll keep you all posted on that too. So you can get your hands on that when it's ready.
And I'll find that that study and send that out about the PFD. So was there any other questions? Did anyone see anything they might want to try? I'm just curious.
I think for us at the UA Museum of the North, it was just an interesting thought that usually we, I think, are currently targeting the facilitator when perhaps we have facilitators and explorers, and that maybe we could start tailoring our message to both audiences and still be successful without excluding one or the other. So that's, I thought that was very interesting.
I'll say I did appreciate the reminder that sometimes using transactional language is what's helpful. Like you were talking about, like when someone's in line and they're just like thinking about the math. I work at a cultural museum at the Alutiiq Museum and Archaeological Repository here in Kodiak. And I think that the majority of our messaging is all like story based and about sharing culture and about celebrating culture and history. And I don't think we really use barely any transactional language. And it makes me wonder that, if maybe there's some people we're missing because some people just want that more cut and dry, like you're saying, like that math of it. They're like, yeah, the heart story, whatever, but what do I get, like, and so that's interesting to think about, that maybe we need to get a little more transactional, although we're in a weird place because we're about to do a massive renovation. And on Thursday of last week was our first day closed for 18 months. So we'll see how membership does during this time.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. So a note on transactional members, which I think tend to sometimes be seen as, it's like this kind of dirty word to be a transactional member. And I really think that's the wrong way to look at it. Transactional members, depending on how you define them, they're still people who love us. They in fact are becoming members. They're doing more than your average visitor. They love us so much. It's just that they're probably not the people who are going to be in your donor pipeline, right? They're not necessarily the people who are going to give an additional gift on top of their membership. In fact, a lot of transactional members consider their membership as a proxy for a donation. So they feel like they've already given as part of their membership. And that's something that we talk about quite a bit, is that in some ways, I think we as museums do a bit of a disservice to ourselves and to our members when we frame membership in the way of talking about it like a donation. So and I'm talking about our entry-level membership levels, not your donor levels. But when we say to our members, thank you so much for your gift, and we couldn't do it without you, we're kind of doing two things. We are telling them that they've already done their part and they don't necessarily need to do more. And I think that's not the right message. I think what we want to be telling our members is that if you love this place as much as we do, and you want it to be here for a long time, we need you to do more. And so being a member, especially if you're one of those more transactional members where you're getting a lot of value from your membership, using it a lot, you need to help pay for it, right? So talking to our members about the expectations we have of what we expect from our members is for them to be financial contributors to the museum, I think is important. The other thing that does, where we run into a challenge, is it ruins the warm glow that we get from giving a donation. So when there's a lot of research out there that shows when we give a gift, a true donation, we get this warm fuzzy feeling, and it's that warm glow of altruism. When somebody gives us something in exchange for that donation, we feel less good about the donation. It kind of just, it puts it into a quid pro quo. It makes it feel more transactional. And so when we talk to our members about, giving a gift and then we give them benefits in exchange, membership is really a more transactional concept. But one way I think we can shift that a little bit is to start creating more experiences that reflect some of these other ideas that we're talking about. One of the things we talk a lot with our clients about is creating member experiences where the museum is facilitating introductions to create that sense of community. Or one of the great stories I like to tell is about some of the museums that do stroller tours. So, these are art museums, and they created some stroller tours for parents with very young children, like newborns and toddlers. So, these are parents who we know being a new parent sometimes can be a bit isolating, and some of your friendships start to fall away a little bit when you have a young child. And so this was a way for the museum to say, new parents, come, bring your children. It's okay if they're loud. It's okay if you need to take a break for feeding or changing or whatever it might be. We are going to be a bunch of parents with new children, and come and meet new friends. And so this was a really, I think, great example of how a museum can be a facilitator, and membership can be a path for that type of a thing as well. We just have to be intentional about creating those experiences.
A thought I just had was like the sensory hours that a lot of museums will have, times for individuals with autism that they're able to come, and there's that sensory deprivation, like that you could maybe incorporate parts of that into a membership as well, and thinking how you can accommodate different types of audiences.
Definitely. Yeah, and I know not sure how it is with all of your organizations, but membership teams, oftentimes we're relying on our educators and our programming staff to create these different programs and events. Some organizations have membership where it is the membership department and the membership manager who's actually creating those events and programs. So it depends a little bit on how much, what your staffing looks like and what your ability looks like to create these types of programming. But one thing we look at a lot is how membership is either kind of designed to be a vehicle for accessing these programs, or if membership can be the thing itself, it designed in a way to meet the needs of different audiences. Obviously, we don't want to create too much complexity in our programs that it would be unmanageable. But I think doing some little experiments to see where you have some success is a great place to start. You don't have to be committed to it forever. You could try out, a new program idea or an event idea, or even kind of tinker with an existing event to see if you might be able to build in some of what we're talking about, and see how it goes, and get some feedback from members and build from there.
Awesome. I think so people can still sign up for the study until when?
Yep. So enrollment is open until the end of June 2024.
Oh,
So
that's plenty of time.
we've got a good amount of time. We wanted to make sure that everyone had enough time to, build the case study internally with your leadership team, and of course, budgeting will be important as well. So yeah, we have kind of a long runway for enrollment there. And our FAQs will have a lot of good information about timeline, logistics, and requirements, kind of workload requirements as well.
Awesome. And then you said you have a map.
Oh, yes. So I wanted to tell you all a little bit about what I'm doing with an organization called Museums as Progress. So this is a community. It's a gathering place of museum professionals, and I co-facilitate a monthly meetup called the Membership Innovation Group. And we just bring membership managers together and we do a deep dive each month into a particular topic. And we have a chance really to kind of have a bit of a brain trust with your peers and colleagues in the membership space to talk about ideas, challenges, questions, whatever it is that kind of is top of mind for you. We create space to share resources and to discuss. And we do that monthly. It moves around from month to month, but I wanted to share that with you all and invite you to check it out. There's an option for a free trial. So if you want to just dip your toe and see if it's for you, you can do that. And if you have any questions about that group, you can certainly reach out to me and we can talk more.
That's awesome. I know a lot of museums in Alaska are in very different places in their membership programs. So talking to other membership people, I think would be really helpful.
Definitely. And not to do a shameless plug here, but I have authored 2 books. The first is a membership manager's kind of handbook. And so if you're looking for a resource that is really a soup to nuts guide for managing a membership program, that is a book that I co-authored with 2 other authors called Membership Marketing in the Digital Age. And my latest book is called Museum Membership Innovation. And that is more of, that is really kind of where it was the catalyst for this research, or I guess they kind of ran parallel, because as I was really thinking about that book and kind of the concept of membership and how it's evolving. I mean, that's one of the great things about membership that I love, is that it's never static. It's always changing. We have so much opportunity to be strategic with our membership programs and to think about them a little differently. So that's kind of the culmination there. Although I like to say that book is really just a starting point, because when I finished it, I found that I have a lot more questions and a lot more things to ask and to explore. And so to me, it kind of just seems like the first step, really. And this research study was part of attempting to get at answering some of those questions that I've been thinking about for the past decade or so.
I think that's awesome. And no worry on the plug, because that's why I reached out to you. It's like, oh, this book, perfect. So yeah, if anyone wants to read any of those books, I just put them in the link. And also the monthly meetup group is in the chat, and the FAQs for the next study are also in that chat.
Thank you, Dixie. And in that membership innovation book, there are some great case studies that hopefully will give everybody some really good ideas too about some different ways to think about membership. Yeah, and then the meetup group is, like I say, welcome to all, and it's just a great place for us to just spend time thinking about membership. I was talking with someone recently about how we're really kind of talking about annual pass. And so you all may be familiar, but the Art Gallery of Ontario introduced an annual pass not too long ago, and they've had really tremendous success with it. They still have a traditional membership program, but a lot of what we're talking about is thinking about how we can create new pathways for people to come in, and that membership doesn't have to be the only way for people to participate. Because I think, in some cases, it's really interesting. I'm kind of going off a tangent here, y'all, but so in our research with organizations, we often find a lot of people who otherwise look like really great candidates for membership. They give to the organization, they visit frequently, they meet all of kind of the characteristics that we would think of depending on the organization, but from a demographic standpoint, household income, for example, and yet they've never been members. And it's not, I cannot believe that it's because we haven't talked to them about membership before, that they don't know about membership. I think they're self-selecting out. They're actively choosing not to be members. And that just is crazy to me. And it's such a fascinating thing that I would love to look into more. But I think, this idea of an annual pass, for example, is creating an alternative pathway that maybe some people feel is a better fit for them. And we can message it a little differently, and it can be a stepping stone to moving people into, an upgraded level of membership. Because in my mind, an annual pass is a form of membership. It's part of a more complex membership model, but it absolutely has all of the aspects of what membership is.
Mhm. Yeah, I do wonder, younger people, I'm wondering if they feel like membership is for them or if that's for old people. So that's kind of a thought that I've been having is, will we see in the museum field a drop off on membership as the older generations kind of age out? And what does that mean for our field? I don't know if that's been what membership organizations have seen. Maybe not as many younger generations joining the way the older generations did, but something I'm always considering.
Definitely. No, I think we're definitely seeing some of that. And then I think just, with the influx of all of the subscription services, we're also seeing a shift in consumer behavior there, where we have expectations of being able to pay monthly. And I think museums are often kind of challenged there, whether they can create a payment structure that allows for monthly membership. That's something that can really, I think, could be a really beneficial strategy for us. But it kind of comes with some challenges in terms of how we structure that internally and with our finance department. But even just the words, the language, and how we label things is really, I think, important. And so, that's another aspect of membership product development, is how we call things, the pricing strategy, what our ultimate goal is. So one last kind of food for thought, as we're talking about membership models, a lot of what our research is showing is that audiences are really looking for flexibility. So one of the things that we've been working with a lot of our clients on is how to move away from some of the more prescriptive definitions of family, or how we define and talk about what this membership covers, and moving more toward structures that allow for multi-generational households, or for two families to share a membership, or for split families, to share a membership. So it breaks that traditional concept of a membership household, in the sense that, if we're expanding it or changing, but really what it does is it allows for flexibility and allows us to better meet the needs of our members, and likely new audiences who we'd like to become members.
Yeah, I will say that as a millennial, and I don't have a husband or family, my friend and I got the animal conservation group. We got a joint membership there. Like, we're not in the same household, but we were like, it's too much for one of us, but if we both chip in, we could have a membership. So that kind of thinking.
Yes, no, I love it. And I often have to kind of argue against that. That's not cheating the system, right? That shouldn't be looked at as taking advantage of. I think it comes back to strategy and what is the purpose of membership. If the purpose is to share spread the mission and have financial support, well then what you're describing, Dixie, accomplishes that goal. So it's really more about how we think about membership from the start.
Mhm. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. We're at the end of our hour, but I learned a lot and I hope everyone else did too.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and talk with you all today. And please reach out anytime. And I hope to stay in touch.